Hello, everyone. We are live here with Sabrina Van Tassel, who's made a very remarkable documentary. It's the state of Texas versus Melissa. Most of you should be finishing it up right about now. I do want to mention that we've had a few technical issues already getting mics to work and whatnot. So I want to let you know that if we do experience any technical issues, if people can't hear us, let us know in the comments. We will move this over to IG Live if we have an issue. All right. So Sabrina, I have so many questions for you. I don't know if we're going to even fit it into what a remarkable documentary and what a remarkable story you've done here. So the first question I want to ask is, how do you earn the trust uh, of a community, of a family, of a woman who's probably been lied to a lot and has been let down a lot? Um, how do you earn that trust?
Well, first of all, thank you for the compliments. This is, probably the film that I've worked the hardest on. So, um, I guess the trust comes from me making 45 films in the last 15 years, documentary, uh, and um, and just being very honest, with people. When I met Melissa's family, I was the first one in 13 years to ask them any questions about Melissa, period. No lawyers had ever asked her any questions, asked them any questions. No reporters, nothing. So they were kind of stunned at the beginning. You're interested, in the life about the life of our sister, of our daughter, I mean, so that's how it started. And just talking to them and looking into them in the eyes and just understanding the incredible trauma that it is for a family to have a family member on death row. Because most people don't realize when you have someone on death row, it's like an instant death sentence. That's it. There is no hope and no future. So most of the time people just forget about their loved ones because there's nothing they can do. And especially Melissa's family, being poor, being Hispanic, being uh, you know uneducated, and they knew that they could do nothing for Melissa, and so that was the big thing. Um, what happened between me and Melissa is an incredible story.
Please
Uh,
share.
oh yeah, because when I met her, I had met her on a previous documentary I was doing about women on death row, right? And um, there was just nothing really written about her, uh, you know, uh, in the media at all. I mean, nothing. So when I met her, I was just like, oh, I don't know. It's just a child abuse case, and I mean, it's a horrible case, but I mean, there's so many cases of child abuse where the person doesn't end up on death row. I mean, you need to realize that. I mean, most cases don't. So, I met her, and the first moment we met, and I was the very first reporter to filmmaker to ever, interview her. Something happened between the two of us. I just looked into her eyes. She just looked into mine, and it was just like my questions were like flowing for like about an hour. And I basically woke up. I was like in a dream, like like daydreaming, talking to her, and just knowing that everything that was coming out of her mouth was the truth. So that was my gut feeling. That was my instinct. And when I left death row that day, I remember turning to my DP saying, there is something incredibly wrong about this story. I mean, this woman did not do what she's accused of. I don't believe it. And I called her lawyer. She told me the name of her lawyer. So I called her and I said, listen, I just met your client. And I mean, there's something more to this story. And she said to me, listen, I'm very happy that finally someone, is interested about Melissa Lucio, but you're just way too late. she's going to be executed within maybe 9 months, a year. So you've arrived just way too late in this story. And this is how it started. It started that way. And she's like, would you like to read, her files and everything? And I said, yes, just give me everything. And I spent the next 2-3 months just reading up to 10,000 pages, just everything.
Wow.
So what you see in the film, and that's very important, is that, of course, this is a story. So I'm not, I have so many hours of rushes and so many interviews that I could not use, right? But, I interviewed every single, neighbor of Melissa. I interviewed everybody. I just went everywhere. I read everything. If there was something in her file, I would have said it. It's not, it's not for me, to defend her or whatever. It's just that there's just nothing, that she was convicted just because of the false confession, and because they saw, her daughter, who was covered in bruises, and she had to be, the one who had done it, and that's it. So that's how it started. Like it was. I've basically been under stress for the last 3 years. That's how it started. It was just like this very urgent matter where I had to, I was discovering something, and that task was on me, and right away I imagined the film that I wanted to do, and Texas, and the people who live there, and the Hispanic community, and those basically those people who don't have a voice, and who end up on death row.
Well, I think that voicelessness is a central theme of so many films at Pendance, from the Through Her Eyes to this film right here, and this concept of how many different themes can this film really be about? Is it about racism? Is it about prison reform? Is it about poverty? Is it about a lack of education? How much? And so often we find that the people who get railroaded and absolutely steamrolled by the system are the ones who are most afraid of it, and they've grown up with this consensus bias against cops. I know from growing up in poverty that my friends did not like cops. We did not like cops because every time we saw cops and we dealt with lawyers, it was always a feeling of.
Where are you?
I apologize. I accidentally cut myself out. Sorry, I was mid-thought. What I was saying was that so many times that we see this situation happen. So I think that there is a bias that exists about cops, about lawyers, but also about reporters and people with cameras, right? There is I know communities where people who point cameras are there for exploitive reasons.
Absolutely.
And I think that, as much as people will say someone like Melissa is not educated in the traditional sense that you and I might define education, I will guarantee anyone, I have not met Melissa, but I guarantee if anyone would talk to her that they would realize that she's very smart, that there is a different type of intelligence that is bred into people who have dealt with situations and hardships like this, and there's a keen sense for bullshit. So the fact that this film is as good as it is, and the fact that you were able to get an entire family to open up to you, it must point to an obvious conclusion that you did this with the most honest intentions. And I think that that's so important for documentarian, but I also think that's important for filmmakers in general, to approach art with, because this is art as much as it is life, and to do so with honest intentions. So congratulations on this film. It has done phenomenal things to raise awareness, and even though there's bad news as an update from the film about Melissa's case, I think the broader implications here extend beyond Melissa, because as much as this film is a very personal story about one woman being wrongfully convicted, in my opinion, being manipulated by a system that was designed to fail her from the very start, and about one woman's quest to tell that story, I think that it tells a lot of different stories. I think there are films like this. The Central Park Five comes to mind that
Absolutely.
that highlight a giant problem. So how much do you feel? And I believe from talking to you just a little bit that you are extremely unfiltered. So how much do you believe that racism played a part in how Moses' trial was handled?
Oh, okay. So it's huge. So first of all, I agree with most of the things you said. Okay. There are different levels of education for sure. I would never have ended up on death row. Why? Because I didn't grow up being afraid by cops or being afraid, of lawyers, or, I knew that, I could have stopped that interrogation. I could have, and even my family would have screamed, they would have, done all kinds of things. So it happens specifically to people like her because, they know that they can. You understand what I mean?
Absolutely. No one will miss them.
Exactly. And so she didn't know. She had never been arrested. She didn't know she could have stopped that interrogation from the beginning. She didn't know that. She didn't know that, she could have, she was a victim. She was a victim of sexual abuse. So she, shut down in the courtroom. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. I mean, I would have cried. I would have screamed even if I was guilty. You know what I mean? So the thing is, it is designed for these people. Like now you're asking me racism. It is a fact that if you're Black or if you're Hispanic, okay, you have higher chances of ending up on death row. And if you're poor, which I guarantee, if you look around, like, and just do your research, there is not one rich people on death row. Not one rich person at all. If you are on death row, it's because you're poor, it's because you're Black, it's because you're brown, it's because you couldn't afford a lawyer, you got a court appointed lawyer, you were offered a deal. Most of the time they'll say, you know what, say you did it 30 years. Oh, you want to go to court? You're not going to take the 30 years? No problem. Death row. And you have to understand that, when the DA's office takes over a case in the United States and basically decides to go to court, they will win in 95% of chances,
Mm-hmm.
every single time. I mean, they don't take a case unless they know they're going to win.
Right.
So, and also the other big thing, because you're talking about racism, which is, it's a lot. It's racism between rich and poor, a lot, which
Yes.
is vicious of all, is that, the DA's office has all the means in the world. It's like you're going against the biggest firm in the United States, and
Mm-hmm.
you court appointed lawyer who has like 100 grand to defend you, and he needs to hire a psychologist. He needs to hire a mitigation specialist. He's going to do the investigation. They don't have any money, so and they have many cases, so
Mm-hmm.
they're going to do a shitty job. I'm sorry, but like most of the time, I mean, it's just if you compare the two, she's already done. And that's why in America, most people, when they're offered a plea deal, I mean, the honest lawyers will tell them, listen,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you didn't do it, just take the plea deal, just do it, because otherwise, you're just going away forever.
Okay.
And that's the difference, that's the difference. And it's huge. So
I
it
think
targets that kind of people. And that's why, death row is so unfair. I mean, how do you go from like 30 years to death row? So, they offered her 30 years, but, now she's on death row. She's considered to be the most dangerous person in the United States, basically, that she can't even like be a part of the carceral population. She can't be in prison because she's so dangerous. Okay, but, you had offered her 30 years. So what's wrong with that picture? It's just, I could go on and on. It's a very unjust system. 2 days ago, Virginia, which is a
Mhm.
very, southern state, banished, the death penalty. And I really wish that, other states will follow. And I wish that Biden will ban, federal executions, and that people will realize how, what an unjust system this is, I mean, there's already a lot of wrongly convicted people in the US. So, when you have a system like that, that is just so broken, and, I don't like saying it's broken because I think it was designed actually purposely to put this kind of people, in prison
Mhm.
in so many ways, but I'm not going to go into that right now. It would be a little long. But, I mean, when you have you have a system that does not work like, and targets, the most vulnerable people in our society, you just cannot have the death penalty.
Hmm. That's a really fair point. And, as much as we are talking about the death penalty and incarceration, there are other types of death sentences that you can give someone. And for instance, we were on a TV radio podcast the other day discussing a short documentary that was coming to Pendance about Aboriginal youth suicide in this particular community. It's called the Bears on Pine Ridge, and it was our opening short. And I see so many similarities between these two films, and one of them is how the system is designed to fail. What you are saying, it's not the system is broken. The system was designed to benefit few at the expense of others. And, in the case of the Aboriginal youth suicide, I mean, there are 80% poverty line. It was one of the poorest counties and poorest reservations in the United States. And how much of this is designed to make these people go away? We don't want to see you in the city. We want you to be isolated. We want you to be, I remember talking at one point to a prostitute who said, "Do you know how hard my job is? I can't even call the cops because I am by default a criminal." And I get that, but she is a human being at the end of it as well. So I guess I feel that this conversation is really a broader topic about how a system is designed to fail people. So do you want to point to some specific examples from Melissa's case? Because you did mention that she did have the investigation, the interrogation, which she did not need to be part of. What else happened throughout the trial that you feel really put the hammer for those who may be curious?
Okay, what did not happen to her during the trial was more the question, because I mean, it just goes on and on. I mean, she gets arrested at 7 p.m., right? I mean, her daughter has just died, and she's taken into and right away, they decide that, okay, oh, it's the mother, so she's got to be the guilty one. Okay, that's the first, that's just the start, let's, get the mother. And like, there's 5 different men who will, with guns, just on her, and who don't even, give her a glass of water, allowed to, go to the restroom for 7 hours. And they're on her until like, okay, say you did it. We already know what happened. We already know what happened. Just admit it. And finally, he says, okay, I'm responsible for the bruising. Because, she wants it to stop. And mind you, there's a lot of people who admitted to something they didn't do. That happens all the time. And she's basically being indicted, at like, 4 a.m. in the morning. And while she's there, she can hear the DA, who, by the way, is in prison right now. So that's another, topic right there. But, she can hear the DA, like, kind of, the DA is already at the police station. He's already like kind of wondering, what are we going to charge her with? And so that's the first thing. Then the second thing, she gets she gets, a lawyer appointed who basically does not explain to her that she's risking death row. That if she doesn't take the 30 years they're offering her, she's done. Okay. And then, then the DA, the court appointed attorney, they do an investigation and basically decides to dismiss evidence. He decides to just put away evidence who could have completely saved her before the trial. And basically says to his team, no, we're never going to talk about this. We're never going to talk about that. Forget about it. You haven't heard anything. And we found out that that actually he's a good friend of the DA. And right after the end of the trial, he went to work for the DA. The same DA who's actually now, was basically accused of extortion and bribery because he was paying off judges and paying off attorneys. I mean, when they arrested him, they arrested him with like a few other judges, and a lawyer committed suicide and jumped off the South Battery Bridge. I mean, just it's unbelievable, this story. The guy was like, he was just, he was terrorizing everybody. So he used her case to be reelected, which is something that's very often the case in Texas. They want to be tough on crime. So they basically, use cases to be reelected. So that went on and on and on and on. And, there was just nothing. But she was, you talked about that, before. She checked every single box of why we should put her away. It didn't matter, if she had done it or not. Melissa's poor. She had way too many children for society. She was, a drug addict. So, she was something that we can easily get rid of. Just disappear, I mean, and the jury, I mean, her court-appointed attorney, did not even allow any of her children to testify, did not even allow any of her family to testify. She basically stood there for 4 days with no defense at all.
And you did cover that in your film, and it's I do want to play this trailer for people who may not have watched it, so that they can get an idea of exactly who you're talking about, because we haven't been able to show her face yet. So let's just, if you don't mind, let's just take a second and put Melissa on.
My name is Melissa Elizabeth Lucio. I'm 48 years old. I have 14 children. I've been on death row 11 years.
There were bruises from head to toe. There were bruises on the face, in the hair, on the chest. This was the worst case of child abuse I had ever seen.
Oh my gosh. She fell all the way down. From the first step up there all the way down here. Imagine the baby falls. The baby?
And did you see her fall, or did somebody tell you that that's what had happened to her?
I saw.
The interview was never presented to the court, and none of those kids ever said that their mom was beating up on Mariah.
It was during election time. Armando Villalobos was running again for DA. I'm the first Hispanic woman on death row, so this was a huge case for him.
Bribery was endemic. He'd be compensated for favorable treatment in criminal cases.
That was a plan, to put her away. My mother, poor, perfect target to help him win his election. She's no criminal, they're the criminals. They're the criminals.
Okay, trailers are marketing materials, but sometimes they do drum up some emotions, and I get chills watching a trailer and watching your film to talk, about how sad it must have been for her, not just because she was arrested for something that she did not do, but that she was arrested during a time when she was probably trying to grieve. and actually the complications of emotions. And I do want to talk to you about, because you've researched this so well. It's such a thoroughly well researched film, and of course your background and as a journalist must inform this as well. There are two psychological elements to this. The number one psychological element is, what does a jury see? And the second psychological element is, what does the accused feel in the interrogation? So the first one, I think it's fairly difficult for any human being to side with someone who has been accused of hurting a child in any way.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you're already done basically when the jury's supposed to be impartial and not have, set, their mind before they get into the courtroom. But seriously, I mean, now we all have iPhones and people, read, everything, and they already have, they're like, okay, 14 kids, poor mom, drugs. Okay. I know that story,
Absolutely.
and that's what happened to her. And so, and then, there is something in the film, which is something I love, is when the psychologist in the film at the time of her trial explains what a victim of sexual abuse, acts like. It is about time that we start, understanding victims and the way they function. It's, about time. People keep saying, she was raped, and then all of a sudden, it took her 20 years to talk. Well, yeah, I mean, if you really knew what a victim of rape, feels like, they shut down. They shut down their emotions. That's how they survive. That's how they cope. And that, the fact that Melissa just shut down, and she explains that very well in the film. She explains that, once she was sentenced to death, she just got, she went back to her cell and she slept. She wanted to forget about it. And that was actually something that went against her in the punishing phase. After she was convicted, there was a guard who said, "Oh, you want to know, what a monster Melissa is? She got into her cell and she slept."
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm giving you this example that's not in the film just to show you how the fact that she didn't show any emotions, the fact that, she was, basically shutting down, which is something that she was doing since she was 7, because she was, raped, for years by her stepfather, for years, not protected by her mother. She was, in very violent relationships, and that's the way she knows how to cope. That's the way victims cope. And now we're starting to know a little bit more about, victims, and about, the way that, they react.
Mm-hmm.
That's very hard to understand for most people. And, but yeah, I mean,
it's a fair point what you're saying, because what we are saying is that she did not have emotions, right? And how can someone not have emotions? The problem, I think, with saying that, for those who say, okay, well, someone who went to sleep didn't react, that they are not expressing their emotions the way you expect them to express their emotions. It's a projection of the self. How would I act if my child was this way? And when somebody does not meet our expected response to something, like, for instance, I give you an example. Like, I mean, yes, and you're absolutely right. People who are abused do shut down. They have different emotional response to things, and they may react to hearing that their husband died with no tears and no emotion. They may even go to sleep the next minute. Some people would be hysterical for 3 days. And we would say, especially if we are of the suspicious sort, that someone who went to sleep right after figuring out their husband died must have killed their husband. And this is the psychological element that I was talking about, is that. But The other psychological element, of course, is how adept people who run investigations are at getting false convictions, and how these tactics are designed, in fact, to create false confessions. Sorry, not false confessions, false confessions. And I encourage anybody who is interested in this subject to not only check out the film, but also check out this YouTube channel called JCS Psychology, in which he breaks down hours and hours of film. Generally, in those cases, the people actually did do it. But if you reverse engineer it, you will see how many tactics are used to manipulate, tire out, lie to people who are in the most vulnerable of situations, and how differently they all react. So how much do you think, I mean, you said, for instance, that you would never be on death row. And
No.
I could probably argue that I would never be on death row. But what would your advice be to somebody who's watching this who fits Melissa's profile? That they are a minority, they are undereducated, and they are, generally susceptible to being afraid of situations like this. What pragmatic advice, in covering Melissa's case, have you gathered that, if you had been able to talk to Melissa the second she got arrested, what would you have told her?
Don't say anything to the cops whatsoever.
Without a lawyer.
Without a lawyer. You don't say a word that I want my lawyer here. That's it. Not a word. That's the best advice. She could have stopped that, she could have stopped it, I would have stopped it. But she you obey, authority, you obey orders, you obey the cops, you trust them, and that's what got her. Because really, I'm a white person, right? And I'm educated, and you find my daughter dead with bruises on it, and nobody's ever seen me done anything whatsoever, so you have no proof. There's no DNA, okay? And I don't admit to anything. What do you have? What do you have? You don't have
I don't think you'd be accused of that. That's the difference, right? Because your response.
that. I would never be accused of that. They'd be like, "Oh my God, maybe she had an accident."
We do give the white people in our society a certain benefit of doubt, don't we? And that's a very true point, right? I mean, we assume that when and it's like reverse engineering, so it's like fitting everything. There's a brilliant lecture. It's called "Don't Speak to the Police." Literally, for any reason whatsoever, don't say anything. And it's strange, but it's very true, because you have no idea until you really sit in that position and really do the research, as you clearly have, how easy it is to confess to something that you have not done. Just linguistically, how easy it is to say something like, "Yes, I did cause the bruises." Because I think that there's a psychological element of this, and I apologize for harping on the psychological part of it, but I think it's really important.
People get confused. At some point, they don't even know anymore. They're thinking, "Well, you know what? Maybe I did it and I don't remember." Or maybe, maybe he's right. Maybe I did that. Maybe I did that. That's what happens. They're so confused, and they're so like, make it stop. And that's what they say to them, right? They say, we can do it. We can all stop, this. We can stop this right now. Just tell us what we want to hear.
Exactly. And it's we already know you did it. We already have this. We already have that. Look, you're just wasting everyone's time. We know this. And they absolutely.
Daughters, sons have told us, that you did that. And she's like, So they're allowed to lie. They're allowed to do all kinds of things. And, it's just an abomination, really. I mean, that's, and it's about time that we stop this. And it's about time that, and I believe that, with all my heart, that we white people, don't accept that anymore. You understand? I mean, like, for example, like some people would be like, "Okay, but you're not Hispanic. Why are you interested, in that case?" Or, I don't need to be Hispanic, or I don't need to be Black to talk about, these things. I need to be a human being, and I need to be a woman, and I need to be outraged by, the injustice out there. And, and I am completely aware of my white privilege, and I'm completely aware of, that, I would never, be in her shoes, in her situation. But, that makes it just completely, that makes me just so mad. It makes me just wanting to scream and just stop everything and be like, okay, let's all be very concerned about this. That's why, people say, when the Black Lives Matter happened, and they're like, oh, lives matter. No, it won't start until Black Lives Matter. We need to understand that. We need to understand how, there's not, we don't have the same justice system, if you're white or black. We just don't. I mean, there was just this feed, on Instagram this week about, Breonna Taylor and, people, who basically got shot unarmed. And all the, gun shooters who, did massacres were just arrested and not killed. And, the ones who, did all these mass shootings were whites, and they're arrested and not killed. But the ones who are killed unarmed are the blacks, so, there's something wrong in there.
And that's really interesting, because I mean, I think that we both may feel very much that the problems are the same, but I take a slightly different approach to what I think the solution might be. Because again, that documentary that I was talking about earlier, The Bears on Pine Ridge, what we were talking about was the hopelessness that is leading children to suicide. And so, I was asked, like, what does story over everything mean? And I said, it's the story you tell yourself when you're growing up. And that changes how you feel about your life. So, if you are, say, for instance, living in America, right? And everything that you hear about is how hard it is to be black, and how hard it is to be brown, and how hard it, well, I mean, honestly, on a psychological level, I think that this makes it very difficult to feel like you can aspire to something better. Do you know what I mean? Like, you feel like at any point, I will have to work 15 times harder than the average white person just to achieve some modicum of success. And I don't even think that that's the message that is told to a lot of Hispanic people or black people. It's that you will always remain less than. And so they say, well, counterculture, I'm gonna do something else with my life. I'm not gonna aspire to the same goals of owning a home and getting an education, because it's not celebrated in my community, because we are told and manipulated into believing that this is not for us, that this is not a part of our culture. And so, it's very interesting to know. I think both sides do play a part. I think, yes, white people do have to absolutely look at themselves and say, what am I doing to save? What am I doing to change the narrative? What am I doing to challenge politicians? What am I doing to, to talk about this and put a voice and to show black and brown people that I at least understand what you're going through, and I am here to lend my support if needed. I'm here to listen to what I can do to be better. I think that's an important part of it. But I think the other important part of it is people have to be empowered to believe that they can take agency on their life, because I think that is something that white people sometimes take for granted, is the feeling that just we walk down to earth with full control over our lives. And that's truly, I think, what white privilege is. Just yeah. So I wanna talk about Melissa a little bit more. Can you give us some updates on her case? Unfortunately, I already know the update, but for those listening, what is the update?
Unfortunately, she basically lost her last appeal in the Fifth Circuit Court, which is, the Supreme Court of Texas. So they reversed her case again. It was a very divided court. She lost 10-7. So, and so now her case is basically up to the U.S. Supreme Court, which takes 1% of cases every year.
Hmm.
Now she's on death row. She's a woman. There's, the film, and she's got, like quite a lot of publicity, lately. So we're hoping that's going to help. And also the fact that, her case was reversed 2 years ago and then reversed again in a very divided court, that might help as well. So we're hoping that they're going to take on the case, which they, there's a high probability that they're not. And if they don't, then the state of Texas could, set an execution date.
I think that, and no offense to anybody from Texas, I've been to Texas, and there's definitely a culture there. I want to ask an interesting question. I think I'm patting myself on the back for an interesting question right now. Do you think that the state of Texas itself is at least a really big part of why this case turned out the way it did? Do you think that this would have happened in New York or LA?
Well, New York, there is no death penalty. So no,
Right.
I think so. No, I don't think so. I think in Texas, where there is a culture for death row, and bear in mind that in Texas, it's the state in the U.S. that executes the most.
Mm-hmm.
Question. So a lot of the judges and the DAs use these cases to be reelected, like I mentioned before, and that already is a big problem. They use those cases to be reelected. There is, that sense of an eye for an eye.
Yeah.
It's quite an interesting place, Texas, because it's the nicest people I've ever met. So good-hearted, and then the justice system. It's just so rough. It's so rough. It's so it's really unbelievable. And I'm pretty sure that this is the state in the U.S. where you'll find the most people on death row right now.
I think a lot of this also has to come down with Texas culture about drugs, right? How do people feel in Texas about people who have too many kids? How do people feel? There's a very rigid conservatism that I think exists, and I'm not talking political conservatism. I'm talking ideological conservatism about what someone ought to be like. And I think Melissa is very much not like that. And I think that I think definitely that is a very big part of how they reverse engineered this conclusion that, if something has happened, she must have done it because look at who she is. And I do hope that a lot of people check this documentary out. A lot of people already have. You won Raindance, and you've been all over the world with this documentary, and you're championing it like every day. And it's so inspiring to see somebody who cares so much about their film, not only in how they made it and how much care went into it, but just how much they're doing to push it out and how much they're doing for the subject of their film and of their documentary. And is there something that maybe people who watch this film, can they write to somebody? I think we can put it in the comments. Is there somebody that they can write to say, hey, you need to, is there a petition? What is
online? There is a petition. Death Penalty Action put a petition online, so you'll find Save Melissa Lucio. I'll send you the link. So please sign the petition. We want the Board of Pardons. If the U.S. Supreme Court does not hear the case, we want the Board of Pardons to be able to watch the film.
Mm-hmm.
Because we know that if they watch the film, it will make a difference. If you can tweet her name, if you can, there's a lot of things on Twitter about her right now. And we're doing podcasts and we're doing all kinds of things about her. So yes, it is about the film. And, I could talk about the films, for hours, but it's about a human's life as well. And so, I'm just, I promised Melissa I was going to be there, till the end, and I was going to fight for her. And, my only way to fight is through a film. And that's, already that's great. And, that enables me to reach out to people saying, oh, you want to know more about her case? Watch the film, watch. and talk about the film. And so the film's, traveling and it's going to be released in theaters in France, and it's being released all through Europe, and it's traveling all over. I had a request from Taiwan the other day, so it's just I'm really happy that her name be known. That's very
Mhm. I think that it can serve as a very powerful example of why we need justice, prison reform and justice system reform. I think it can be a cautionary tale. I do hope, of course, as watching this film, it's hard not to root for an acquittal, or to have this trial, to get her a fresh trial and to give her a fair chance to actually defend herself with a legal representative that's on her side, and not just leaving her out to slaughter. And I hope that does happen. But I think regardless of the outcome of this case, I think that you've created a conversation, and I think that you've created a very powerful film that will affect a lot of lives. And I hope that maybe if somebody who is destined to be the next Melissa, 10 years from now or 2 years from now can watch this film, that this is a type of film that can help them too. We have a question here from Boyana. Do you speak with Melissa often?
all the time. Okay, so I cannot speak to her. Actually, I might be able to have a Zoom meeting because I'm now on her visiting list. And since COVID, she cannot have visits, so I might be able to, but I doubt that's going to happen. The way we do it is I write to her and she writes me back. You can actually write to her. There's an application called JPay, which you will find on your iPhone, and you look for Melissa Lucio in text, and you can send her an email. And if you give her some stamps, she can write you back. And so that's the way we communicate. I communicate with her all the time. I mean, actually my children have written to her. So that's how, that's how intimated, it got to be. I mean, my kids, they know of Melissa. They know of, of her family. They know of her story, and she writes them. They write her. Yeah.
We have one more question here. You've done 2 films on prison system. What is next for you? Will you continue exploring that?
No, I'm going to leave that for a little bit. There's 2 films that I'm preparing. One actually has to do with the film you were talking about, Pine Ridge, which has to do with the women, Native women who disappear in the United States, and rape and all that. So that is a
super important.
That I've been working on for years now. Very hard to do. And I'm doing another film right now about guns in America.
This is so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to see your next film. And it's just there's an old saying that the way you do anything is a reflection of the way you do everything. And yeah, so I think that I think there's just standards of research and excellence that's present throughout your filmography, and I really can't wait to see what you do next. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your film with Pendance. To anyone who's missed the film and wants to check it out, you can catch it here in Canada on YouTube, actually. It'll just be $3.99. You can just pay the same amount. Jillian, a filmmaker who I really admire, actually, Jillian, saying this is really interesting. She just, I believe she just made her first feature with Telefilm Canada. So thank you for that. Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much, and our best wishes to you and to Melissa. And thank you for sharing this with the Pendance audience. This was technically your Canadian premiere, so
it was, and I'm going to tell Melissa all about it.
I'm so happy. Please tell her that we say a warm hello and that we are rooting for her. We are all rooting for her.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye, Sabrina.